Hello everyone. I welcome you all to this news analysis. These are the articles that are important from today's newspaper. Before we move on to the first article, we will see this. See, this article is something known as death by cyberchondria. Recently, a tragic incident occurred in Rajasthan's Bhilwara district where a mother allegedly killed her two children after believing she had terminal cancer. Medical tests later confirmed that she did not have cancer. So, what went wrong? The woman had symptoms like mouth ulcers and abdominal pain. Instead of reassurance, she kept watching health related videos on social media, especially reels that falsely linked mouth ulcers to cancer. Over time, her fear intensified. This phenomenon is called cyberchondria. Cyberchondria means excessive anxiety caused by repeatedly searching health information online. Unlike earlier times, people today do not just search for information, algorithms push content to them, often reinforcing fear. Social media platforms like Meta and YouTube use AI driven recommendation systems. If a person watches one health related video, the algorithm shows many similar videos, creating a fear spiral. Now, why is India especially vulnerable? India now has over 1 billion internet connections, but health literacy is uneven. Trust in informal sources is high, and access to mental health professionals is limited. Medical misinformation spreads faster than verified information because fear based content gets more engagement. Doctors explain that online searches cannot replace clinical diagnosis. Symptoms overlap across many diseases, but algorithms lack medical context and cannot assess patient history. And it also raises policy questions like, should misinformation be regulated more strictly? How can digital platforms be made accountable without harming free speech? How can mental health awareness be integrated into public health systems? See, to conclude, cyberchondria shows how unchecked technology, misinformation, and weak health awareness can combine with tragic consequences. The solution lies in digital literacy, responsible algorithms, stronger public health communication, and accessible mental health care. The first article for the day, Center signs tripartite pact to create Naga authority. The union government has signed a tripartite agreement to create a new administrative body called the Frontier Nagaland Territorial Authority or FNTA. This agreement was signed between three parties, the Union Home Ministry, the Nagaland State Government, and the Eastern Nagaland People's Organization called ENPO. This ENPO represents 8 Naga tribes living in the 6 eastern districts of Nagaland. These districts are Tuansang, Mon, Kifire, Longilang, Noklak, and Shamater. So, what is this FNTA? The FNTA will be a new territorial authority for these 6 districts. It will receive powers over 46 subjects, meaning many administrative and developmental responsibilities will now be handled locally instead of entirely by the state government. Now, why is this important? Eastern Nagaland has long demanded greater autonomy and development, citing neglect and backwardness. Instead of creating a separate state, the government has chosen devolution of powers within the existing constitutional framework. The Union Home Minister described this as a step towards a dispute free Northeast. He also highlighted that since 2019, the center has signed 12 peace and political agreements in the region. For UPSC, remember these key takeaways. This is an example of asymmetric federalism and decentralized governance. It shows how the center uses dialogue and institutional arrangements to address regional aspirations, and it is relevant for GS Paper 2 Polity and Governance and GS Paper 3 Internal Security. The next article for the day, the fading of India's environmental jurisprudence. India's courts were once global leaders in protecting the environment. They expanded Article 21 to include the right to a clean and healthy environment and applied principles like the precautionary principle and public trust doctrine. However, recent developments show a gradual dilution of environmental protection, often in the name of development. Number one, consider changes in environmental impact assessment. In December 2025, the policy for non coal mining projects was changed to allow EIA without full details of land location and area. This weakens the preventive nature of environmental law and encourages post facto clearances, which courts had earlier rejected. Number 2, Aravali's Hills case. Earlier, the Supreme Court recognized the Aravallis as a continuous ecological system, not just hills above a certain height. Mining was banned to protect groundwater, biodiversity, and prevent desertification. But in 2025, the court accepted a 100-meter height based definition, removing protection from large ecologically sensitive areas. This departs from earlier judgments and raises concerns under Article 14, 21, and Article 48A. Number 3, similar dilution is seen in mangrove destruction for infrastructure projects allowed on the promise of compensatory afforestation, Char Dham Highway project where ecological risks in the fragile Himalayas were balanced against strategic needs despite evidence of landslides. Such decisions ignore that ecosystems like mangroves and mountains cannot be easily replaced. A key concern is procedural fairness. Large corporations and infrastructure projects often clear regulatory hurdles easily, while public objections are sidelined. This creates inequality and undermines Article 14. The Constitution is very clear here. Article 48A that state must protect the environment, and Article 51A clause G, citizens must safeguard nature. When courts relax environmental standards, they weaken their own past jurisprudence and public trust. See, India's environmental jurisprudence is shifting from protection to permission. Development is necessary, but when environmental safeguards are diluted, the long term costs are borne by the future generations, and strong judicial oversight remains crucial. The next article for the day, intent and outcome. Since 2021, union budgets have started reflecting climate concerns. Initially, the focus was on solar manufacturing, mainly to reduce dependence on Chinese imports. However, the overall approach has remained cautious and fragmented. In Budget 26-27, the government focused on five major areas like heavy industries like steel, cement, and aluminium, decentralized solar power, solar irrigation pumps, green hydrogen, and nuclear energy. The most highlighted announcement was 20,000 crore rupees over 5 years for carbon capture, utilization, and storage. What does this mean? The CCUS is a costly and complex technology. The current allocation suggests India is still in the pilot and testing stage, not large scale industrial deployment. Countries like Norway and Canada have tried it, but scaling has been difficult and expensive. Now, why does this matter for India? The European Union's carbon border adjustment mechanism will tax carbon intensive imports. This directly affects Indian exports like steel and aluminium. So, reducing industrial emissions is now not just about climate responsibility but also export competitiveness. On renewable energy, there are some positives. The PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana saw a budget increase to 22,000 crore rupees promoting rooftop solar. This helps reduce transmission losses and household electricity costs. However, challenges remain, especially with respect to DISCOM cooperation and upfront financing. The PM Kusum scheme for solar pumps continues with steady funding and absorption has improved. For nuclear energy, the government has extended zero customs duty on plant equipment till 2035. But nuclear power remains capital intensive, slow to build, and risky for private investors despite recent legal changes. Green hydrogen also shows a familiar problem, that is, strong policy announcements but low actual spending. So, India's climate policy shows strong intent but limited budgetary commitment and uncertainty in attracting private investment. Without higher and more consistent allocations, India may struggle to meet both its climate goals and economic competitiveness needs. See the next article for the day, more and less. The total health allocation in budget 2026 is about 1.05 lakh crore rupees, roughly a 10% increase from last year. At first glance, this looks positive, but in reality, health spending remains only 0.26% of GDP and 1.9% of total government expenditure, which is much lower than what experts have long demanded. Now, what are the positives? A major announcement is the Biopharma Shakti scheme with an outlay of 10,000 crore rupees over 5 years. The aim is to make India a global hub for biologics and biosimilars. The budget also proposes 1,000 accredited clinical trial sites across the country, 3 new NIPER institutes and modernization of existing ones, a second NIMHANS campus in North India and 2 upgraded mental health institutes. These measures strengthen research, innovation, and mental health infrastructure. On human resources, the government plans to train 1 lakh allied health professionals and train 1.5 lakh care workers for elderly care. This is important as India is moving towards an aging population. On affordability, the budget exempts 17 cancer drugs and treatments for rare diseases from customs duty, and it reduces tax on medical and education remittances. This directly benefits patients and families. Now, where does the budget fall short? The biggest criticism is that the government has not moved closer to spending 2.5% of GDP on health, a target promised under the National Health Policy 2017. There has also been a reduction in funding for the National Health Mission despite good utilization of funds. While states are spending more due to fiscal devolution, experts warn that a shrinking central role may lead to uneven health outcomes across states. So, Budget 2026 strengthens medical research, pharmaceuticals, and affordability, but continues to underinvest in public health systems. Without higher public spending, India may struggle to ensure equitable and universal healthcare. The next article for the day, should the governor's address be scrapped? Recently, governors in states like Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala either walked out of the assembly or refused to read parts of the address prepared by the state cabinet. This led to accusations that governors are violating the constitution. Now, what does the constitution say? Under Article 176, the governor must address the state legislature at the start of the first session every year and the first session after assembly elections. This address outlines the policies and programs of the elected state government. Importantly, the content is prepared by the state cabinet, not the governor. Can a governor refuse or change the address? No. The Supreme Court in Nebam Rebia case 2016 clearly held that the governor's address is an executive function to be performed only on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. The governor has no discretion to alter, omit, or refuse to read the speech. Now, why are such conflicts happening? The governor is part of the state legislature under Article 168, but governors are appointed by the union government. They hold office at the pleasure of the president, unlike the president who is accountable to parliament. This creates a perception that governors may act in line with union interest, especially in opposition ruled states. Should the governor's address be scrapped? There are two views. One view says the address is symbolic and dispensable since legislatures function normally in other sessions without it. Given rising partisan behavior, scrapping it may avoid repeated constitutional confrontations. The other view says the practice should be retained as it reflects India's parliamentary tradition. The problem lies not in the convention but in governors exceeding their constitutional limits. Is presidential intervention possible? Yes. Under Article 160, the president can issue directions to ensure governors discharge their duties. However, such intervention has rarely been used in practice. What about a constitutional amendment then? Scrapping the address through amendment is politically difficult as it requires a special majority in parliament. Some experts argue that a more meaningful reform would be to change how governors are appointed and removed to strengthen their neutrality. See, this issue involves federalism, role of governor, Article 168, 176, also 160, center state relations, and constitutional morality. See, to conclude, the controversy is not really about the governor's address, but about constitutional discipline and limits of authority. Without reforms, such confrontations risk weakening India's federal and democratic framework. See the next article for the day, Discoms and the road ahead. For many years, Discoms were known mainly for heavy losses and rising debt, high AT&C losses, that is technical and commercial losses, low revenue recovery, and delayed subsidies from state governments pushed them into chronic financial stress. Between 2021 and 24-25, accumulated losses rose to over 6.4 lakh crore rupees and outstanding debt crossed 7 lakh crore rupees. So, what has changed recently? There are signs of a turnaround. In 24-25, Discoms together recorded a positive profit after tax of 2,700 crore rupees compared to huge losses a decade earlier. Key improvements include AT&C losses reduced from about 23% to nearly 15%. The cost versus revenue also almost eliminated, and better payment discipline towards power generators. The union government credits this to reforms like revamped distribution sector scheme and late payment surcharge rules, which allowed discoms to clear old dues in installments. These measures helped bring down legacy dues and improve financial discipline. But is the improvement sustainable? This is where concerns remain. Many discoms are showing profits only because of state government support, mainly through tariff subsidies and takeover of discom losses by state governments. For example, utilities in states like Tamil Nadu and Rajasthan reported profits only after receiving large subsidies and loss compensation. Without this support, they would still be in loss. There is also a risk that future expenses such as employee pay revisions could push discoms back into deficit. Now, what is the way forward? Experts suggest expanding feeder segregation, especially in states with unmetered farm power, promoting solar pumps in agriculture to reduce power procurement cost, avoiding blanket promises of free electricity, which often benefit richer households more, and strengthening political will and professional management. See, these DISCOM reforms are crucial for energy security, fiscal health of states, sustainable development, and power sector reforms, especially in General Studies 3 paper. See the next article for the day, Rethinking Battery Strategy in India, the case for sodium ion technology. See, for this year prelims, you should know the difference between lithium and sodium ion batteries. See, batteries are now central to modern life, from mobile phones and electrical vehicles to renewable energy storage. They are critical for economic growth, energy security, and the clean energy transition. At present, lithium ion batteries dominate globally. They offer high energy density and long life, and their costs have fallen sharply over the last decade. However, this dominance hides serious structural problems. Lithium ion batteries depend on critical minerals like lithium, cobalt, nickel, and graphite. These minerals are concentrated in a few countries and they are vulnerable to geopolitical risks and largely imported by India. Even though India launched the PLI scheme for advanced chemistry cells in 2021, domestic battery manufacturing is still limited. More importantly, India lacks strong upstream capacity in raw materials and processing. This means import dependence will continue. This is where sodium ion batteries become important. Sodium is abundant, widely available, and cheaper than lithium. Sodium ion batteries reduce dependence on critical minerals, lower supply chain risks, and improve long term energy security. Technically, sodium ion batteries have slightly lower energy density than lithium ion batteries, but this gap is narrowing. Safety is a major advantage here. Sodium ion batteries are far safer than lithium ion batteries. They have lower risk of thermal runaway, easier storage and transport, and no requirement to ship at partial charge. They can even be stored and transported at 0 volts, reducing cost and safety risks. Another big advantage is manufacturing. Sodium ion batteries can be produced using existing lithium ion factories with minor changes. This lowers capital costs and allow manufacturers to switch technologies if supply shocks occur. Globally, sodium ion battery capacity is already expanding fast and could become cheaper than lithium ion batteries by 2035. Now, what should India do? Experts suggest expanding incentives beyond lithium ion to include sodium ion batteries. Number 2, updating standards and safety regulations. Number 3, supporting R&D and pilot projects. Number 4, encouraging EV makers to approve both battery types. And number 5, focusing early deployment on grid storage and 2 and 3 wheeler EVs. See, the next article for the day is Army renames 246 roads, buildings, and facilities to shed colonial legacy. See, this move aligns with broader national efforts to decolonize public spaces, reassert Indian history and identity, and honor freedom fighters and war heroes. The next article for the day, US shuts down 200 illegal online pharmacies tied to an India-based criminal organization. See, this was done by an operation named Meltdown. Now, what was the modus operandi? These websites claimed to be legitimate and FDA approved, pretended to be based in the US, and sold medicines online without prescriptions. In reality, many orders were fulfilled using counterfeit pills, often mixed with fentanyl, which are highly dangerous substances. Now, why is fentanyl important here? Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that is extremely potent. Even small quantities can cause fatal overdoses. Pills sold online look like genuine medicines but contain fentanyl, leading to deaths. See the next article for the day. Supreme Court flags states' preference for ad hoc DGP appointments. The court said this practice violates its 2006 judgment in the Prakash Singh case. Now, what did the 2006 Prakash Singh judgment say? In that landmark case, the Supreme Court held that the post of DGP must be insulated from political pressure. State must appoint a regular DGP with a minimum fixed tenure of 2 years. The idea of acting or ad hoc DGPs was rejected. Using its power under Article 142, the court directed that states must select a DGP from among the 3 senior-most and meritorious officers. These officers must be empaneled by the UPSC. What is the problem now? The court observed that many states are deliberately delaying the process of appointing regular DGPs. Instead, they continue with acting DGPs of their choice, undermining police independence. In the case of Telangana, the UPSC informed the court that the state has not had a regular DGP since 2017. No proposal was sent to UPSC for appointment of a regular DGP for years. As a result, many senior and meritorious officers lost their chance to become DGPs. Now, what directions did the court give? The Supreme Court directed the UPSC to proactively write to states when a DGP appointment is due and allowed UPSC to approach the Supreme Court if states ignore this process and warned that accountability will follow for officials responsible for delays. See the next article for the day. India GCC nations signed terms of reference for FTA. See, India and the Gulf Cooperation Council have signed the terms of reference to begin negotiations for a free trade agreement. Now, what does this mean? Signing for the term of reference is the formal starting point for FTA negotiations. It sets the scope, objectives, and framework for talks between the two sides. Who are the GCC countries? It consists of 6 countries: Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Together, these countries are India's largest merchandise trade partners, with trade volumes higher than even India's trade with the European Union or the US. The next article for the day, the end of New START and a new era of nuclear rivalry. Now, what was New START? The New Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. was a nuclear arms control agreement between the United States and Russia. It came into force in 2011 and placed verifiable limits on both countries' strategic nuclear weapons. Key provisions included a cap of 1,550 deployed nuclear warheads each, limits on delivery systems like intercontinental ballistic missiles and bombers, and on site inspections, data exchange, and a bilateral commission. Its purpose was to ensure predictability, transparency, and stability in nuclear relations. Why did it collapse? Although extended once till February 5, 2026, the treaty effectively collapsed earlier. In 2023, amid the Ukraine war, Russia suspended participation, citing hostile Western actions and inspection difficulties. Now, as of February 5, New START has expired completely. Now, why is this dangerous? For the first time since 1972, there are no legally binding limits on United States and Russian nuclear arsenals, no inspection mechanisms, and no formal data sharing. Both sides must now rely on satellites and intelligence estimates, which are less reliable and increase miscalculation risks. Another problem is entanglement. Nuclear and non nuclear weapons, cyber warfare, and hypersonic systems. These can threaten nuclear command systems without crossing a clear nuclear threshold, increasing escalation risks. The last article for the day: UK sanctions RSF Sudanese army leaders over conflict. The United Kingdom has imposed sanctions on 6 individuals linked to the ongoing war in Sudan. These individuals are senior leaders from both sides of the conflict. Now, who has been sanctioned? The Rapid Support Forces, a powerful paramilitary force, and Sudanese Armed Forces, the country's regular army. Both were sanctioned, and they are accused of committing or enabling atrocities and fueling the conflict through arms supply and mercenaries. Now, just know about what is this Rapid Support Forces and look in the map about Sudan. So that's all for today. Thank you all for joining. That's all for today. Thank you all for joining.